Hello everyone, this is Jimmy and welcome to episode 13 of Omnifactory. I got a new microphone, so I hope the audio is slightly better than it was before. Maybe you'll hear a little bit less of me breathing, which I'm sure can only be a good thing. So today I would like to work on a few infrastructure projects, let's call it. So if we look at our diesel generators, right, we still have these single high voltage diesel generators, but they're not burning our diesel fuel fast enough. Our quantum tank is full, all our machines are backlogged because we have no storage for more diesel. So I think it's time to upgrade that. You remember how like 4 episodes ago we talked about upgrading our diesel? Well, now it's time. Another thing I did between episodes that I want to show you is I expanded our ore processing a little bit to handle a few specialty ores. So if you look at here, if we take sphalerite and galena ore, we can react it with sulfuric acid to produce this indium concentrate, which we can then react with aluminum dust to produce tiny piles of indium dust. Now it takes, you put a lot of stuff in just to get a tiny pile of indium dust, but this stuff is very valuable. You can craft it into full indium dusts, and then this indium gallium phosphide dust is used in a chemical reactor to make higher tier CPU wafers. So it takes a lot of input to make this indium, but it is very valuable, and I'm glad we have it. The other thing I did was I changed the way we were processing redstone. If I can find where I put that machine. So redstone ore, instead of doing the usual route of putting it through a macerator and then the washing and whatever, we can directly react it again with sulfuric acid. We're using up a lot of sulfuric acid in our ore processing. But when you react redstone ore with sulfuric acid, you produce liquid redstone, which we're just turning into blocks. But perhaps more importantly, we produce this, let's see what it's called when it comes out. Crushed rodo, you know what, I'm not even going to try that one. We produce this stuff, which is used in high tier reactor plating for nuclear craft, which is, we'll use it later for various nuclear craft components and for like the 0 point module, among other things. So let's tackle our diesel generator problem now. Remember, before I mentioned I want to use the diesel engine, this one. And it was the circuit that was holding us back, but now that we have access to easier circuits, we can do it. And again, this diesel engine, it's a extreme voltage machine, but if we feed it oxygen as well as lubricant and obviously the diesel it burns, it'll produce 3 amps of extreme voltage power, so like a little over 6,000 EU a tick, which is like 1800 RF a tick, right? Which sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to these dynamos for a single block, they produce, 2/3 of that. But oh well, we have to use our diesel fuel somewhere. So let me go ahead and build a couple of those, maybe like 6, and we'll find somewhere to set them up. All right, let's build ourselves a diesel engine. So here's where we're producing the rest of our power. It's a little cramped, but I think we can fit these in here as well. So I have the materials for 10 of them, but I'll only build one, I think, on camera. Like the other GregTech multi-blocks, they can share blocks. So my plan is to build them such that they can be stacked vertically on top of each other. And if I do this right, that should allow us to save on some components, because this actually used up a whole hell of a lot of titanium. Do I have room here? I do, just barely. Let's stop that. And here we have it, one diesel engine. So into here we have to supply a lubricant, a type of fuel, which for us will be, so the lubricant is lubricant, obviously. The fuel will be cetane boosted diesel, and optionally we can supply oxygen to make it produce both more power as well as more energy per bucket. So there's our first one, and let me go build the other 9 now. And here we have it. 10 diesel engines stacked on top of each other in 2 neat columns. Now, the reason I went with 2 neat columns is because you see when they're running, they each produce, this is 3 times whatever, 2048, I believe. So they produce 3 amps, and 3 times 5 is 15, which is 1 less than 16, which is the amperage maximum of our CEUs. But there's actually one thing I want to test, and I want to test it together with you. So while these produce 3 amps, the energy output hatch, if you look at it, says amperage out up to 4. So I intentionally have only hooked 4 of them up to each of these CEUs, and I'm wondering if I hook the 5th one up, will it burn our wire? And I have a bad feeling it will. But let's figure out together. So these are the EV cables. I don't really care to lose them, so here goes nothing. Oh, and a tree grew in me. But it looks like it didn't burn the wire. Okay, so it looks like while the output hatches, I don't have one on me, but while they say they can output up to 4 amps, when you use them in a diesel generator like this, they'll only output 3, which means our 3 times 5 is less than 16, so our 16x wire doesn't burn. How nifty. Anyways, here we have it. They're being fed diesel as well as oxygen and lubricant through our ME system. And then if we look over here, our diesel production, or diesel tank, is no longer full, and our production is running once again. So let's calculate the total energy output of this block. We have 10 diesel engines, each producing, let's call it 6k EU a tick. So that's another 60k EU a tick, or a little over 240k RF a tick. That's actually a meaningful increase to our energy generation then. If we look at this, without our ore processing running, we're only consuming about 250k RF a tick. So just the diesels alone can almost support that. That's good news. That means we have room to grow. And if you haven't noticed yet, we tend to use up our room to grow pretty quickly. So we'll enjoy it while it lasts. But let's move on to our next project now, which I think, let's see, we have some options. But one thing that's been kind of bothering me is the quest book here. We've had the Empower available for some time, but we haven't been using it. And I think we can use the Empower to significantly increase our, well, diesel output. So if we look at the recipe for biodiesel, biodiesel can be made with one of these here. Here we go. So we can make it with empowered oil, crystallized oil, or refined canola oil. And right now we're using crystallized oil, which means with ethanol, for every 3 buckets of ethanol, we get 6 buckets of biodiesel. Right? Because the ethanol is our bottleneck in our biodiesel production. But if we upgrade to empowered oil, for every bucket and a half of ethanol, we get 6 buckets of biodiesel. So if we can start making empowered canola oil, we can double our biodiesel yield. And that seems pretty good for what should be a pretty simple setup. So let me go craft us a couple empowerers. Well, I guess one set of empowerers. We'll dedicate this set to making crystallized canola seeds. And, or empowered canola seeds, sorry. And then we'll go set that up. So it turns out that the Empower is actually pretty easy to automate if you're only doing a single recipe in it. Now for this specifically, I'm only using it to process empowered canola seeds. So let me walk you through how it works. Now all of these wires could be run underneath the machines and would look, a lot prettier that way. You don't have to, look at them. But they're harder to access and it's harder to see what's going on. So I tend to value ease of understanding over how it looks. Although I'll acknowledge that this is a horrible, unsightly disaster. Anyways, so I have a ME interface here that's set to stock crystallized canola seeds as well as regular canola seeds with a crafting card to craft these crystallized seeds. Remember, the crystallized seeds are crafted right here in the atomic reconstructor. So what I do with, well, let's look at the recipe for these first. To empower these, you put a crystallized canola seed in the middle and 4 regular canola seeds around the edges. So I have item filters on the insert side of all of these display stands and the empower. The one in the middle is obviously for crystallized canola seeds, and the rest are for regular canola seeds. So on the interface, I have it extracting on brown with a redstone or active without a redstone signal, so that I can turn it off with this level emitter. And in this level emitter, I just have to set how many empowered canola seeds I want to keep in stock. So let's set it to 500, and you see immediately it begins running. The way that the empower works here is that the items that get put in will only become extractable after the crafting task is done. So when the crafting task is done, I extract it on blue, dump it back into the interface, which puts it back in the ME network. And this runs very quickly, far quicker than we can consume these seeds. So all we have to do then is come over to our chemical reactor, which was making crystallized oil, and switch it over to using empowered canola seeds instead of regular canola seeds. So put you in here. Now let's see, why is this not running? Because we're not producing ethanol. Did our ethanol get jammed? These are running. Well, we have ethanol. Why is it device online? Device offline? Why is device offline? What happened here? Are you connected? Well, now you're not connected. Anyways, that looks like it was a funny bug. I won't worry about it. If it pops up elsewhere, I guess I'll just keep an eye on it. But this should start running now. Now we have a lot of canola crystallized oil in there for now, but we can just void that, I think. Let me grab a tank and pull that out. This stuff is pretty low value, so we'll have a bit more. Alright, so now that that's done, now what's the problem? Does this have to be... It has to be HV, haha. Aha, haha. Okay, let me go ahead and make a transformer, I guess, and then I'll swap this to an HV machine and be right back. Alright, adding the transformer here meant that we can now put a HV chemical reactor here. It also means we have to change the wiring up a bit because our machines are no longer adjacent, so we can't just rely on auto pushing ability, but it's still the same process, right? Canola press makes oil. It gets sent into the chemical reactor, which reacts with the empowered canola seeds, which sends the empowered oil into a chemical reactor, which goes with ethanol, and it just makes biodiesel while consuming less ethanol. So there's our upgraded biodiesel setup, and let's figure out what our next infrastructure project can be. The developer of this pack has let me know that our rocket fuel making process, we do it using the high voltage method using nitrogen dioxide, is actually unintentional and will be removed in an upcoming patch. I believe it's actually already been removed in the beta patch that I've chosen not to update to because I value the stability. But at the same time, let's not be a cheater then and use this cheaty rocket fuel. Let's set it up the right way. So if we look at the recipe for rocket fuel, right now we're using the high voltage chemical reactor method, which will be removed. So we have to switch over to using the mixer method of mixing 1,1-dimethylhydrazine with dinitrogen tetroxide. And I do believe the quest book actually walks you through the process of making rocket fuel pretty well by making first hypochlorous acid, methanol, and ammonia, and then combining them in certain ways to make chloramine and dimethylamine. Anyways, I think I'll implement this method and I'll show you what it looks like as we go. The first product we want to make is this hypochlorous acid, which is made by chlorine, water, and mercury. Chlorine and water we already produce offsite, so we just need to make mercury. And as the quest book says, it's most easily made by electrolyzing mercury, and we get some side products out of that. Or sorry, electrolyzing redstone. So I'm going to set up an electrolyzer to do this. And here's our redstone electrolyzer. It electrolyzes redstone. The product of the mercury product we're storing with the fluid storage bus. And we'll use that then to make our hypochlorous acid, sorry. And that's just done in a chemical reactor. Next up, we have to make methanol. And if we look at the recipe for it, there's a couple options for it, but the one I want to use uses that carbon monoxide that we've been saving so preciously from our titanium production, combine it with some hydrogen, and it produces methanol. The next raw ingredient we need to make is ammonia. So the easiest way to make this is just to jam some hydrogen and nitrogen together. And with our production of ammonia, we now have all of the ingredients we need to make 1,1-dimethylhydrazine. So the next step is to combine the ammonia with the methanol and the ammonia with the hypochloric acid. That'll produce both the dimethylamine and the chloramine, and then you combine the two together. So do that. One of the byproducts of the 1,1-dimethylhydrazine production is diluted hydrochloric acid, which I'm planning on just distilling back into regular hydrochloric acid and recycling somewhere. But for some reason, there's not a high voltage distillery. It goes from medium to extreme voltage, so that's kind of annoying. It just means we have to run a transformer so that we don't blow up our medium voltage distillery on our high voltage line. I honestly don't know why the machine doesn't exist, but I guess we make do with what we got. The last thing we have to do before turning our 1,1-dimethylhydrazine into rocket fuel is to make dinitrogen tetroxide, because we could react it directly with oxygen and get 1 bucket for 3, but if we react it with dinitrogen tetroxide, 1 bucket of this becomes 6 buckets of rocket fuel. And this is very easy to make. You actually just take nitrogen dioxide, which we're already producing elsewhere in the base, and combine 2 of them. So I guess 2 nitrogen dioxides make a dinitrogen tetroxide. Kind of makes sense if you think about it, right? You double the numbers. So we can do that, and then we'll make our rocket fuel. And last but not least, putting our 1,1-dimethylhydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide together, we have rocket fuel. Would you look at that non-cheaty rocket fuel? If my understanding of chemistry is correct too, the 1,1-dimethylhydrazine is hypergolic, which means it should react spontaneously with a oxidizer, which means this should be exploding right now too, so that's fun. Anyways, now that we have our non-cheaty rocket fuel, I guess we no longer need this. Is it this one? Nope. We no longer need this cheaty rocket fuel, right? So 16 million buckets or millibuckets of it, goodbye. We'll just void you. But hey, don't feel too bad about it. We have the other one automated, so now this is not very useful. For our next project, let's automate the launching of microminers. So right now we can automatically craft them, but we still have to, take the ship and take the fuel and go over to the microverse projector and put them in to launch them. Well, let's automate that process, and here's how I plan on doing it. First, I take the ship of the tier that I want to automate, and I put it in the anvil and rename it a descriptive name to match the mission. So for example, for this one, we can call it something like Tier 1 Microminer for ores. Then, in our pattern terminal, I will encode a recipe that says take the Tier 1 Microminer as well as the launch fuel for it, and it'll make Tier 1 Microminer for ores. Now, I know this recipe doesn't actually make any sense. We're not actually crafting this out of that. But I'm lying to the ME system and saying that. Then I grab an interface, and let's rename this as well. We'll bring it over to our small microverse projector. Put it by the input hatch and put this recipe in there. Then we can grab a export bus. Put that on the interface and put it capacity cards and acceleration cards in it, and put this, our renamed microminer, in the export bus. Then we can hook all that up to the ME system. And in here we should now see, when we look at tier 1 microminers, oh, I did tier number 1. So when we look at that, we see the one that we renamed, but we see that we can craft them too. And all we have to do is middle click it and say, give me 10 of these. And what'll happen is I'll see that I don't have enough small steel gears. Let's encode that really quick. And for now, we're still making small gears in the with hammers. We can eventually switch over to using fluid solidifiers or something, but another problem for another time. So let's order 10 of these. And what'll happen is, as the microminers get crafted, they will automatically get sent to this interface, which we should put on blocking mode as well, so that we don't try to put too much stuff in there at a time. They'll get sent to this interface, which will push them into this item input, which will process the mission. Then, because the item that we named is constantly cycling in our ME system, it'll clear the crafting task so that it doesn't sit on the crafting CPU when it's done. So let's see. It's a little annoying to track our recipes now because we have so many background crafting tasks. But you see, as soon as the does blocking mode not work here? That's a shame. Anyways, as soon as the recipe here completes, it pushes the items into our input, and it begins the mission. And it clears the pending craft from the crafting CPU. So as soon as these 8 finish, this job will be considered done, and our microminers will be off. The reason I choose to rename an actual microminer for it is so that when I go to search in our ME system, say we have all of our tiers set up. When I search for just the word tier, let's search for microminer. It'll show as items so that I can just choose which one to launch more easily. You can also do this using a piece of paper. Anyways, let me set this up for the other tiers of microminer. And actually, maybe let me rename this to something like Tier 1 Microminer Mission, so I can search for the word mission. But yeah, let me do that and I'll show you the final product. After setting up the microminer missions for the 4 tiers we've unlocked and for the ones that have multiple possibilities, we need 2 of them, we can now search for mission in our crafting terminal and see all of our microminers that we can do. And say we want to launch a tier 4 mission to get more of the osmiridium ores. Well, let's see right here. It's cut off because that's the name length limit. But we can just middle click it and say, give me 8. Go. So there's a small issue where if I don't shift click this, sometimes it doesn't start. And the reason that is if you look at the recipe, it uses this glass, and there's 108 of it available when I start when I generate the crafting plan. But by the time I go to actually craft, they've been used by something else. So when doing my crafts, generally speaking, I'll shift click the start button so it bypasses that screen. Anyways, with that out of the way, we can keep an eye on this, I guess, to watch it go. But let's talk about the next thing I want to do, and that is to begin procurement of the nuclear fuels we'll need to get into nuclear craft. So let's look at the nuclear fuels we'll use. The first fuel we'll burn is this TBU fuel, which is made of a bunch of thorium. In fact, it's all thorium-232, and this is made in a thermal centrifuge from the GregTech version of thorium. But there's a small snag. It takes a really long time, right? We have to do this 9 times to make one piece of fuel. So if we don't overclock it, that's like half an hour for one. That's way too slow. Now, for one, we can overclock it, but to get more yield out of your power, you want to run things in parallel. So to produce this thorium fuel, I'm thinking we'll run a bunch of thermal centrifuges in parallel, maybe something like, a 24-ish high voltage ones. And that way we'll produce a fair amount of thorium fuel in a reasonable amount of time. The other type of base nuclear fuel we'll use is this lightly enriched uranium-235 fuel, or LEU-235, which is composed of 1 piece of uranium-235 and 8 pieces of 238. So likewise, uranium-235 and uranium-238 are made by centrifuging the GregTech variants into the nuclear craft variants, taking the same, 160 seconds per. So, it looks like this produces a little 235. Cool. Anyways, so yeah, looking at the energy usage, it is an MB recipe, but it barely touches MB tier, which means if we want to run on a single 16x high voltage line, let's see how many we can put. Normally, you only want to put 16 machines on it, right? But because this is not using, basically, it will not use 1 amp a tick. We could actually put about 40. So let's go with 36. The reason I picked 36 is because it's a multiple of 9. That way we can do, we'll have 2 processing uranium-235, 16 processing uranium-238, and 18 processing thorium. And that way we'll simultaneously produce both the 235 and 238 fuel. So we're going to need 36 thermal centrifuges. Let's look at the recipe for thermal centrifuge. Make sure there's no surprises in store for us. Okay, yeah, that's no problem. We can easily craft 36 of these. So let me get this process started, and then I'll get it set up for us. 36 thermal centrifuges ready to go. Let's place and configure them. Ooh, that was a handful. So now these are all running slow as they may be, but they will slowly centrifuge our uranium-238, 235, and thorium down into their nuclear craft forms, eventually sending them into this interface where they'll be waiting for us for, I suppose, when we're ready to use them. Alright, so we've gotten a lot of infrastructure projects done today. Unfortunately, no progression, but progression will have to wait until tomorrow, I think. Hopefully, by the time tomorrow rolls around, we'll have processed a fair bit of nuclear fuels that'll help kickstart our fission program. Anyways, let's wrap up this episode here. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.